morning and welcome to Morning Movie News. Now, for quite some time, Ryan Gosling has been a major quote-unquote get for the studios. Everybody's wanted him for one of their big tentpole projects. For instance, it was rumored he might be in Suicide Squad. Well, he's been very apprehensive to sign on to any of these projects, even though he has been game, which I guess is why so many rumors have floated around, because he's willing to take the meetings, but he never signs on the dotted line. And I say that because I got to interview him for The Place Beyond the Pines, and I said, you should be in a comic book movie, and his response was, all the good superheroes are taken. And he might have had something of a good point there. But it looks like not all the Disney properties are taken. And of course, lo and behold, who would get him but Disney? And that's with the announcement that he's going to be making a Haunted Mansion movie, a reboot, obviously, from the Eddie Murphy one that came out, I think, over a decade ago now. But the person at the helm, who probably had a lot to do with persuading Ryan Gosling to make a Disney Haunted Mansion movie, would be Mr. Guillermo del Toro. Now, right away, I'm sure you're thinking, and I'm sure Legendary Pictures is thinking as well, are you remaking Crimson Peak for an all-ages audience over at Disney at a competing studio? Because, of course, Crimson Peak is a Universal film, which I think has the potential to be quite successful this Halloween season. But it's definitely not for all ages, as anyone can attest who's just seen the trailer. It's got like a sex scene in it, it's super violent, it's got blood everywhere, and that, of course, would not be the movie that Disney would make. And perhaps, Guillermo del Toro is intrigued by the idea or the challenge of making a family-friendly movie. I mean, he certainly dipped a toe in that, arena already, for instance, producing The Book of Life, an animated movie which did a wonderful job celebrating Mexican culture. That's a fantastic film. If you missed that in theaters, be sure to catch it when it's available. I don't know if it's come out yet on demand yet or not, or for streaming, but keep an eye out for it because it's worth your time. It was very well done. A little bit traditional in the storyline, but the visuals are what made it, again, worth your time. So maybe that he likes the challenge. And I would also say the thing that impressed me about the Crimson Peak trailer the most was the use of special effects, and that he really just went for the horror haunted house film that everybody's always wanted to see. That's what I liked about the Crimson Peak trailer. And I think that the Disney live action, be they theme park property adaptations or fairy tale live action adaptations, they've really benefited from big budgets and incredible special effects and big name talent. And if a Haunted Mansion film can have that, I think that would be really exciting. And something of a level of epic quality. I think that's where the first Haunted Mansion failed. I think Eddie Murphy can be quite good when he wants to be. And I think that the Haunted Mansion's a good property. But it was too much of a family-friendly film the first time around, a little bit more Disney Channel than Disney theatrical. And I think, of course, with Guillermo del Toro and Ryan Gosling, you would get something much different. And I just think it's interesting, though, also to see Ryan Gosling finally moving into this area. Because, he's really been a holdout for quite some time to be, in the more independent film arena, working with talent like Nicholas Winding Refn. They have that documentary coming out where they're like, we don't know what we're doing when we make this Only God Forgives movie. Let's just see how it turns out. And I think anyone who's on the business side of Hollywood would be like, this is a horror movie. How do you not know what you're doing? Why did I give you any money? And of course, as we all know, it did not work out. And I think that's probably contributed partially to Ryan Gosling's desire to maybe try this stuff out after all. Because I'm sure he sees people like Michael Fassbender who are having great success in tentpole pictures, like the X-Men films, obviously, but then still being allowed the ability to experiment with films like Slow West, Frank, and the upcoming Macbeth. And then Assassin's Creed is another more mainstream film. But that Michael Fassbender is controlling because he's a producer on it. So I think that Ryan Gosling probably would feel that is a pretty attractive career path, and so perhaps I should get on that. But I think this could do very well. I think it's very smart of Ryan Gosling. I think he should have done this a year ago, but it's never too late to join a Disney property. And I think Disney continues to have an impressive ability to package, and I think to match the right stars with the right property. I think that Angelina Jolie, of course, was incredibly important to the success of Maleficent. I think Cate Blanchett was very successful. A big part of this success was Cinderella. And also, to be fair, I think Lily James and Richard Madden were very good choices for Cinderella and her prince for that film as well. Very good, strong ability to cast. So, I'm curious to what you guys think. Are you glad that Ryan Gosling has finally acquiesced, or are you like, no, another talent has fallen. I guess Tom Hardy would be like, it didn't work out so well for me with The Dark Knight Rises, so I'm just saying. But hopefully with Mad Max, Tom Hardy will have a little bit more success, and maybe he'll even eventually make a straight-out, epic blockbuster film and, get a little bit more job security. All right, so that's the first story of the day. Now, the second story of the day is about a project that's quickly coming together, haha, and that's the Flash movie over at Warner Brothers. And it looks like, we already know they've cast their Flash, Ezra Miller, but they've now brought on Phil Lord and Chris Miller from the Lego Movie and the 22 Jump Street films, or 21 and 22 Jump Street, to put together the story with the potential to direct. They haven't decided yet if they want to direct. I guess they'll see how they feel about how the story turns out. But nevertheless, they're crafting the story. And they're very funny guys and very clever guys. We also had Cloudy with the Chance of Meatballs. They're one of those rare, behind-the-camera talents that came up through animation and quickly moved to live action. And have really kept a toe, or not a whole entire half of themselves in animation, of course, the Lego franchise. I think they're a fantastic match with this property, but it does make me wonder if they're doing Wally West over Barry Allen, because Barry's not that funny, from what I'm familiar with the character. I'm not a big fan of Silver Age comics, so I'm not that familiar with Barry Allen. Wally West is more my Flash, and I think he's a lot of people's Flashes, considering the fact that animation has spotlighted him so heavily over the years recently. So I wouldn't be surprised if they went with Wally West. Just like I think they should go with Jon Stewart for Green Lantern, but, I'm that kind of comic book fan, where there are other comic book fans who think what I just said was sacrilegious. But Ezra Miller playing Wally West for Phil Lord and Chris Miller makes sense. Ezra Miller playing Barry Allen with Phil Lord and Chris Miller, you're like, what doesn't fit here? And I'm telling you, it's Barry Allen. But I think with them at the helm, or even just coming up with the story, I think there's a lot of potential suddenly for this property. It's going to have a rough time. I think that obviously the show has a very strong cult following, so to try and wrestle the character away from that, maybe that's why they would want to do Wally West, because Barry Allen is the focus of the Flash on the CW, so let's not have competing Barry Allens. Even though we have competing Flashes, we'll have Flashes that, complement each other, Wally West and Barry. And maybe they can do the situation where the Flash comes from the future, right? They could always go with that choice as well. They've done a lot of exploration with that, for instance, most recently in Young Justice. They had a Flash come from the future and deal with our Flash, and, et cetera, et cetera. So that could really work. And I think Ezra Miller kind of does seem like he came from the future. And also, I'm happy for this development because I think Ezra Miller is quite funny. He's a very talented actor, like a dramatic actor, but he's also really funny. Really clever wit. When they interviewed him at Sundance about playing the Flash, he was really funny about it, being like, I'm not in shape yet for doing any actual running, but, I'm kind of getting in the zone. I'm prepping myself for some actual physical activity. And I think that was really great. I appreciated him embracing and acknowledging the fact that he's not an athlete, but making it his own and making it work with the whole setup. So I think for the chance for Ezra Miller to show off how funny he is would be really a great opportunity for him and make him a little bit more of a commercial commodity. I know some of you might be like, what's with you and commercial commodity? Why is that so important to you? It's important to Hollywood, and it's important to getting a box office track record. Look how it's opened up Robert Downey Jr.'s career, Scarlett Johansson's career, Chris Evans' career. It's all because they've proven they can bring people into the box office. And when you get your fans in these big blockbuster movies, the fans are now starting to follow these people to smaller movies, which I think is very exciting. So I'm hoping that, that would be the case, perhaps here with Ezra Miller. He can continue to experiment after making The Flash, but The Flash would almost be like the spine or the foundation of his career. So I'm curious to what you guys think. Do you have a little more hope for the Flash film now that Phil Lord and Chris Miller are working on it? And what do you think of Ezra Miller? If he's playing Wally West, or potentially the future Flash, that's not Wally West, do you feel a little more confident in his casting? Alright, so that's the second story of the day. Now the third story, if you thought the first two annoyed some of you with the commercial aspects to it, you're not going to like the third story. And that's that apparently at the beginning of March they actually made an arrest in the leak of the Expendables 3 film. An individual, a gentleman, was arrested in London on March 9th in the morning. He's a 26-year-old man, and he was arrested at his place of work, at his office, and then they searched his apartment in Leeds. And they arrested him not only for pirating or being involved with the pirating of The Expendables 3, but also several other films. And it was the result of a joint investigation between the U.S. and the U.K. And Sylvester Stallone released a statement today thanking law enforcement for enforcing creative ownership. He said it's the theft of artistic work. Now, some might argue about the quality of the artistic work of The Expendables 3, but still, I think if anyone here has ever created anything, the idea that someone would enjoy it without, contributing to the possibility of you doing it again, or because it takes your time, it's your job. I'm sure you can understand how Sylvester Stallone feels, and how anybody who works on these projects feels. There's this idea that, oh, you have so much money already, you don't need my money, etc., etc. But not only is it these people's salaries, but also, the success of a film or anything, be it a TV show or a comic book or a book, etc., the success of it is judged based on the sales, right? So if you pirate it, the sales aren't counted. So the studio thinks that there's no interest in their property. Or if they're like, well, a lot of people pirated it, well, they're like, well, why would I continue to make something that people don't pay for, right? So when you pay to see something, don't think of it as, oh, I'm just giving money and it's going right into the pockets of the stars or the big wealthy people. First of all, it's not. It's going into the pockets of many of the people who work below the line on the film, union jobs, etc. But also you're voting for that content. You're voting for this idea and the people involved saying, I like them. I like what they're doing. I want to see more of this. I believe in this. So it's very, very important, the ticket purchase. But I'm just curious, as we enter more into the digital age, what do you think of how law enforcement is finally really, clamping down on, illegal downloads and theft, etc. Pirating, that's the word, sorry. I had a total blank. So what do you think of them cracking down on pirating so much? Do you think that's a good idea? Do you understand what I'm saying? Or are you still in the camp of, I want to watch it and I don't want to pay for it? And then also I would say, since we're getting to be in a more digital age and these things will be made more readily available digitally, and there's no longer the argument of, well, it's not playing here, or I have to wait too long to see it. Would you stop pirating if you do pirate? And also, the other thing I wanted to mention here is that they're also getting very aggressive with those who just simply download the material and not facilitate it. For instance, you might have also seen this story where someone is suing Warner Brothers and the company that helped Warner Brothers out with this, and that apparently they were able to surmise that this individual illegally downloaded some Warner Brothers content. So they were robocalling him and actually sending people to track him down and ask him for $20. And they were like, you got to pay us $20. You took our material, you owe us $20. And Warner Brothers has been like, hey, we offered him a really nice way to resolve this and just give us $20, but he won't do it. And he stole our stuff. So I'm just curious, what do you think of the enforcement and all this stuff? And, this is something that's coming to a head because we're going increasingly digital. And the more you go digital, the easier it is to take things, etc., etc. So I'm very curious of your thoughts on this, if they've changed at all. This is certainly an evolving conversation. All right, so on to the viewer question, which comes from Chris Laza. And Chris Laza asked a question after my own heart, and I have to support him because we have to stand together. So Chris Laza said, hey Grace, sending some love from the UK for your show, and congratulations on another great episode. Thank you. He said, I thought of this question when my friends and I were discussing your Guardians of the Galaxy review on Beyond the Trailer. I share your opinion, says Chris, unpopular as it may be. That's true. There's a definite group of us who didn't like Guardians of the Galaxy, which really ticks off particularly Marvel fans, and they're very, very aggressive about it. So Chris, I'm very proud of you and impressed with you for standing your ground. So Chris says, we feel that the film was disappointing. And he said, my friends were quick to point out that my criticisms can go back to bite me when Suicide Squad releases, which I'm very excited for, but also nervous about. Chris, we're on exactly the same page. It's crazy. So he said, so here's my question. As another outlaw team-up movie, how can Suicide Squad triumph in places where Guardians failed? Hope you see this, Chris. I did see it, and I have to support you. But I also have to say, it's fun to argue our different points, but I also want to say to you, your friends, and I'm sure this is always the way it is often. I don't know if this is your situation, Chris, but it's a situation I find myself in, where I'm like, hey, I don't like this, but if you like it, that's totally cool. But for some reason, it's not okay for us to have different opinions sometimes, some people feel. I don't know, it's weird. But I don't want I always have felt this way, okay? I was really surprised that people like Guardians so much, to be honest. And as I've said before, mea culpa, I shouldn't have assumed everybody would be on the same page as me. That was something I think a real, turning point for me, doing this. But I would say that I never, ever, ever would want anyone to think that I was disparaging of their opinion on a film, right? I mean, if you like a movie, great, that's awesome. This is all opinion-based. At the end of the day, that's why I focus so much on the box office and et cetera, and the contracts and all those numbers and the financials, because that's the only true way to assess something's success, right? Everything else is an opinion. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, et cetera, et cetera. So the Guardians of the Galaxy was obviously a huge success, but I do think that, as time goes on, I'm sure people realize, you see the really people riffing on it, making jokes about it. And, you have a very bad villain in that movie, and you have a situation where your hero actually does a dance-off to win the day. And as many people have commented, and I totally agree with this, why, Ronan wouldn't just deploy the device and be like, I don't have to watch this, is just really ridiculous. But then, of course, in Furious 7, Vin Diesel refuses to shoot Deckard Shaw, right, even though he has the opportunity. But I mean, I thought it was a little more palpable because he was like, I want to get you with my fists, and you're like, okay. But the dance-off, especially since Ronan didn't even know what dancing was, I don't know, it just was really, I felt there's a little too cartoonish. I felt it was very tangential to a lot of other sci-fi. I thought Star-Lord was really like a hugely based on Captain Kirk, etc., etc. So my situation, what I would say, is that two things. One, I would hope that Suicide Squad doesn't try to be Guardians of the Galaxy. I think that's the best thing it can do. It can try to be its own thing. And it already has so many successful incarnations of itself to draw from in the video games and also the animated movie Assault on Arkham, that it doesn't need to try and duplicate what Marvel did with Guardians. It might be DC's answer to Guardians, but I think that that's where they should leave it. So I would say also it's going to probably benefit from DC's trump card, which is a darker, grittier, and more realistic storytelling. Where there's actually, for instance, one of the problems I had with Guardians is that they didn't really seem like criminals, right? I mean, you weren't like, oh wow, these are the most dangerous criminals. Even Gamora, supposed to be the deadliest woman in the galaxy, never really was explored or even indicated. I think someone said it. They were like, oh, you're deadly. And they're like, well, I'm glad you told me because I've seen nothing to show that. And I just think, so if they can make sure that these villains seem like they need to be locked up, they are dangerous. They need explosives in their heads to make sure that they stay on track and listen to orders. I think that that's really important. And I think with David Ayer at the helm, that is probably going to be realized. Now, I think the major problems with Suicide Squad aren't worrying about repeating Guardians of the Galaxy's mistake, because, James Gunn is such a distinct filmmaker. He's very different than David Ayer. I can't imagine they would ever make similar movies, right? I think they have to worry about being too much like a David Ayer movie and kind of, copying some of the mistakes that he makes in his films. So we'll see. I think Suicide Squad, I'm very excited about it, very hopeful, but I would like to remind people that I was very excited about Guardians of the Galaxy as well. I went into that film thinking it couldn't possibly be this good, could it? And then I discovered that, in my opinion at least, it was not. But I hope that's not the case with Suicide Squad. But I really liked the animated movie that they did. And so if they're drawing on that, which I suspect they are, I think they're, headed down a good path. So that's my answer to your question, Chris. Good luck standing your ground. Good for you for not folding. And again, I'm sure you're being very, respectful of your friends' opinions, and I hope that they are respectful of yours. All right, everybody, that's today's morning movie news. Please write down below what you think of today's top 3 stories and the viewer question, anything you'd like to see covered on Monday, and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.